straps, ankle brace, whole everything, all over the whole city of New York. Sabrina Ionescu and Breanna Stewart looking like ancient people. I ain't lying. These young ladies look sensational. Now, I don't want to toot my own horn.
The corporate sports media establishment refuses to acknowledge what actually transpired in Brooklyn last night. Critics who spent weeks trashing this roster are desperately scrubbing their social media history clean. New York's front office sits in stunned disbelief, while every franchise across the league suddenly realizes the competitive landscape just shifted dramatically. We explicitly predicted this exact scenario would unfold. Sitting in this exact chair 24 hours ago, we methodically explained why Indiana's devastating injury situation was actually a perfectly concealed strategic advantage that would force stubborn coaching decisions to finally unlock untested roster depth. Last night at the Barclays Center, in front of a shocked and increasingly silent crowd, Indiana stepped onto the court without their franchise cornerstone, Aaliyah Boston, without their premier three-point threat, Lexi Hull, without veteran backup floor general Tyasha Harris, and without Damaris Dantas, then proceeded to face a fully healthy New York super team, and absolutely demolished the defending Eastern Conference champions on their home floor by a jaw-dropping final margin of 109-91. You've returned to WNBA Pro, the completely unfiltered and relentlessly analytical destination for the most intelligent basketball discourse available anywhere online. If you're seeking superficial statistics recap, uninformed casual commentary, and sanitized corporate messaging designed to shield fragile coaching reputations, you need to exit this video immediately. Today we're dissecting the tactical brilliance that just unfolded in New York, the devastating reality of Caitlin Clark's defensive magnetism, the undeniable league-shifting emergence of Raven Johnson, the unprecedented 62-point outburst from the second unit, and the critical coaching modifications Stephanie White must urgently implement if this organization wants to raise a championship trophy. Let's begin by directly confronting the absolute systematic destruction of New York's highly praised defensive scheme. Because Indiana didn't simply win a meaningless exhibition contest, they delivered a comprehensive beatdown to an entire city when you examine the actual unedited game footage.
Nice pass, Timpson.
I'm not even gonna lie. The Fever bench is nasty, bro. They might have
Former league MVP Breanna Stewart and elite marksman Stewart and Ionescu genuinely appeared like aging veterans desperately attempting to match pace with an Olympic sprint team in their athletic prime. New York confidently deployed their proven championship starting lineup, fully anticipating they would physically dominate and mentally break an Indiana roster missing its foundational interior presence and primary perimeter shooters, but the complete opposite reality manifested on that hardwood. Indiana relentlessly accelerated the tempo, ruthlessly attacked the painted area, and completely suffocated the heavily favored Liberty with blistering transition velocity and intensely aggressive perimeter containment. Now the lazy, uninformed, casual observers, the bitter statistics obsessives, and the envious veterans currently watching from their living rooms are going to immediately and maliciously fixate on Caitlin Clark's box score production. They're going to examine a stat sheet. Observe she logged exactly 17 minutes, recorded 7 points, and converted a seemingly inefficient 2 of 10 from the field, including 1 of 5 from three-point range. And they're going to desperately and pathetically attempt to construct a false mainstream narrative that the greatest offensive catalyst in league history somehow faltered under the Barclays Center spotlight. So let me completely obliterate that pathetic, uninformed narrative right now with genuine, high-level, undeniable tactical basketball intelligence. Caitlin Clark absolutely did not falter. She completely and fundamentally dismantled New York's entire defensive structure without even needing to efficiently score the basketball. Liberty head coach Sandy Brondello essentially approached a completely meaningless April preseason exhibition contest like it represented Game 7 of the WNBA Finals. Within the opening 5 minutes, Clark emerged completely aggressive, dropping early buckets and transmitting an immediate terrifying signal to the Liberty coaching staff, and in response, Brondello commanded her entire defensive scheme to completely panic and overreact by aggressively face-guarding her, violently trapping her 30 feet from the basket, and deploying multiple 6'4" highly physical defenders at her just to prevent a clean reception. And what exactly did Caitlin Clark execute when confronted with that unprecedented defensive attention? She played a contest of absolute elite strategic chess by gladly accepting the aggressive triple teams, operating as the ultimate terrifying gravitational decoy, effortlessly initiating the rapid ball movement that completely shredded the Liberty rotation, finishing with 4 crucial assists and absolutely 0 turnovers. Let that mathematical reality fully register in your consciousness, because a second-year floor general facing the most aggressive physical trapping defense in the Eastern Conference, Operating entirely without her primary screening center in Aaliyah Boston, logged 17 minutes of high-usage basketball and failed to commit a single turnover. When you foolishly allocate 2 or 3 elite defenders to neutralize one single player 30 feet from the basket, you mathematically, undeniably surrender a massive 4-on-3 numerical advantage for the remaining floor. Clark's pure gravitational force generated wide-open, uncontested driving corridors for every single player wearing an Indiana uniform, and the mere psychological threat of her launching a 30-foot logo 3 completely short-circuited the New York defense. You don't need to score 30 points when your mere physical presence on the hardwood completely destroys the opposing defensive coordinator's entire strategic blueprint. But as incredible as Clark's gravitational impact proved, the absolute biggest, most earth-shattering storyline of this 109-91 preseason massacre originated directly from the bench.
Caitlin Clark ain't really play that much, man. But the most, to me, Raven Johnson stuck out. Now, granted, she only had 6 points. She had 8 assists, 0 turnovers, 3 rebounds, 3 steals, plus 3 blocks, and she was 3 for 3 from the field.
For the past entire month, the loudest, most cynical critics throughout the sports media ecosystem have been screaming that Indiana's draft selections were completely redundant, that the roster lacked functional depth, and that the bench represented an absolute catastrophe waiting to materialize. Last night, those heavily criticized bench contributors stepped onto a massive national platform against a super team and completely violently dominated the basketball contest. The Indiana bench scored an absolutely mind-blowing 62 points from the second unit, suggesting Indiana might literally possess the absolute deepest, most lethal hyper-athletic bench in the entire WNBA. We mathematically understood there existed a possibility they could perform well, but absolutely nobody anticipated they would be this unbelievably dominant. Let's discuss specifically the absolute revelation that is Raven Johnson, the incredibly controversial first-round draft selection that absolutely everyone, including massive segments of the fan base, claimed was a massive mistake because she positionally overlapped with Caitlin Clark. With Tiasha Harris sidelined due to a knee injury, Raven Johnson was violently thrust into major, highly scrutinized minutes against an elite championship-tested backcourt. And what exactly did she execute under that massive pressure? She orchestrated an absolute flawless masterclass in two-way professional basketball.
Hey, she worth that money, man. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this right here. Watch Kelsey Mitchell. Laser. Dark. Splash, bruh. Splash.
She is bringing up
Johnson, bruh. Raven Johnson get coast to coast on this. Watch her. Watch her. My goodness, Raven looked a good job.
She finished with 6 points, converting a perfect 3 for 3 from the field, but the scoring was absolutely not the primary storyline. She completely, utterly terrorized the New York Liberty Guards by recording 3 massive steals and 3 incredible blocks, proving an absolute defensive menace, violently jumping into passing lanes, fighting through heavy screens, and refusing to allow the Liberty Guards to breathe for a single second. And offensively, she commanded the second unit with the composure and precision of a 10-year veteran by dishing out an absolutely staggering 8 assists with 0 turnovers, 8 assists, and 0 turnovers against the defending Eastern Conference champions. She accelerated the pace with blinding velocity, she protected the basketball, and she finished with a massive plus 14 plus-minus rating, mathematically proving last night with live competition unfolding on national television that she can absolutely orchestrate the offense at an elite level and permit Caitlin Clark to safely receive the physical rest she desperately requires without the offensive system collapsing into total chaos. The highly vocal critics who claimed Raven Johnson represented a wasted draft pick are completely embarrassingly silent today, and because of the massive gravitational pull of Caitlin Clark, the highly compensated Indiana veterans absolutely feasted on the mathematical advantages generated by the system. Kelsey Mitchell stepped onto the Barclays Center floor and demonstrated exactly why she deserves every single penny of her massive $1.4 million Supermax contract.
Coast to coast, bro. And Caitlin Clark made it look easy. Sophie Cunningham came out gunslinging. Gunslinging threes. Don't look like she could have got.
When the basketball touches Kelsey Mitchell's hands in the half-court, it represents absolute, undeniable currency. She logged 17 minutes and dropped a highly efficient 18 points, shooting 7 of 12 from the field and perfectly converting 2 of her 3-point attempts, launching laser-accurate splashes from beyond the arc all night long, completely demoralizing the Liberty defenders who were entirely too focused on neutralizing Caitlin Clark. Mitchell finished with an absolutely staggering +20 rating while on the floor, proving the ultimate hyperspeed secondary assassin that this offense requires to punish trapping defenses. And then you have the absolute gritty enforcer Sophie Cunningham, who stepped directly into the starting lineup due to the injuries and emerged gunslinging from the perimeter. She splashed highly contested threes, dropping 13 points on elite 5 of 8 shooting, including 3 massive daggers from beyond the arc. But it wasn't just the shooting, it was the unmatched level of physical toughness and pure swagger she brought to the floor. When you observe Sophie Cunningham operate with that level of extreme confidence, aggressively rebounding and defending much larger players, it becomes brutally painfully obvious that the Indiana front office probably should have allocated her a significantly larger financial package and a much longer contract extension, because she represents the ultimate unapologetic enforcer that this high-speed finesse offense desperately requires to survive the physical brutality of the WNBA. And we absolutely cannot ignore the continued mathematically undeniable validation of Damiris Dantas. Wait, actually it's Justine Peters, because we literally just released a massive documentary exposing the highly classified information that the Indiana front office was allegedly planning to release this 6'4" elite sharpshooter, simply to preserve a minimal amount of salary cap flexibility. We explicitly warned them that it would represent a fireable offense, on last night in exactly 10 minutes of highly restricted playing time. Justine Peters stepped onto the floor and completely justified our entire scouting assessment by dropping 8 points, converting 2 for 3 from the three-point line, and finishing with a staggering +16 rating, +16 in 10 minutes. When you position a 6'4" sniper on the wing, the opposing defense physically cannot rotate fast enough to contest her shot. So if Lynn Dunn and Kelly Krauskopf examine this 109-91 box score and still decide to release her, they should be immediately investigated for gross organizational negligence. However, we are WNBA Pro, and we absolutely must maintain our elite standard of ruthless, unwavering objectivity. Because despite the massive 109-point offensive explosion, there were highly concerning, glaring disappointments on the floor last night, and we need to actively engage in some necessary, brutally honest tactical criticism of head coach Stephanie White and the front office. Monique Billings was an absolute unmitigated disaster on the interior, because when Aaliyah Boston was officially ruled out with a lower leg injury, the massive rotational burden to protect the paint fell squarely on the shoulders of the veteran frontcourt. We heavily anticipated observing a significant, highly physical impact from Monique Billings inside the paint against massive players like Jonquel Jones and Breanna Stewart, but instead she appeared completely lost in the defensive rotation, provided virtually zero physical resistance, struggled to secure meaningful post positioning, and was entirely outplayed by hungry, aggressive rookies like Michaela Timpson. If Monique Billings cannot physically anchor the paint in a backup role when the franchise center is injured, her massive 2-year fully guaranteed contract instantly becomes a severe, highly damaging liability for this front office, and this represents the exact lack of size we have been aggressively warning you about. Furthermore, head coach Stephanie White absolutely cannot utilize this massive 109-point blowout victory as a convenient excuse to completely ignore the massive defensive lapses that occurred throughout the contest. Because yes, the Indiana offense was an absolute unstoppable buzzsaw that completely overwhelmed the New York Liberty, but surrendering 91 points in a 40-minute game is absolutely unacceptable for a team that wants to capture a championship. There were highly concerning repetitive moments of complete defensive miscommunication, entirely missed switches on the perimeter, and a glaring absence of weak side help that permitted the Liberty to obtain easy, uncontested buckets at the rim. And Stephanie White's defensive scheme appeared highly disorganized whenever the Liberty managed to penetrate the initial point of attack. White must immediately address these fundamental defensive lapses in the film room today, because you can easily survive making defensive mistakes in the preseason when your offense miraculously scores 109 points. But when the grueling regular season commences, the scouting reports tighten up, and the offensive shooting inevitably goes cold for a quarter, those exact same defensive lapses will mathematically cost you basketball games. The coaching staff must demand absolute uncompromising perfection on the defensive end, regardless of the massive numbers on the scoreboard, and we discussed Stephanie White's highly concerning journey over championships mentality a few days ago. And those defensive lapses are exactly what manifests when the coaching staff lacks the ultimate ruthless urgency required to demand perfection. The Indiana Fever just transmitted a massive, terrifying league-altering message to the rest of the WNBA by confidently walking into a highly hostile arena, completely missing their foundational starting center and their absolute best shooters, and completely mercilessly humiliated a championship contender on their own floor. The bench is incredibly shockingly deep. Raven Johnson is a legitimate, terrifying two-way transition weapon. Kelsey Mitchell is an elite, hyper-efficient assassin. Justine Peters is an unguardable 6'4" spacing anomaly. And Caitlin Clark's sheer unprecedented gravitational presence is completely breaking elite defensive coordinators' strategic planning without her even needing to shoot the basketball efficiently. The preseason is officially here. The uneducated narratives are being completely destroyed by actual game footage, and the live competition is finally underway. A massive, deeply appreciative acknowledgement to our highly loyal channel members like Sarah, Mark, and David for always maintaining the vision, financially supporting the channel, and actively demanding elite, uncompromising tactical analysis, because we are aggressively building the absolute smartest, most fearless basketball community on the entire internet, and your incredible loyalty makes this massive deep dive documentary content possible. Violently smash that subscribe button right now if you want the absolute deepest, most analytical breakdown after every single Indiana Fever game this season that the lazy mainstream media is completely terrified to report. Drop your completely unfiltered raw prediction in the comments below about whether Raven Johnson just completely silenced her critics with that 8-assist, 0-turnover masterclass, whether Stephanie White needs to immediately bench Monique Billings for her lack of physical resistance, and whether Justine Peters mathematically guaranteed her roster spot with that unbelievable +16 performance, because I want to read every single highly educated prediction in that comment section. Hit the notification bell immediately, because the excuses are completely gone, the evaluations are real, and the greatest, most scrutinized season in the history of the WNBA is officially starting right now.